Welcome back to the LATAM Medtech Leaders Podcast. Today, our guest is James Sapirstein. Hey, James, great to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Gracias.
All right, listeners, James has served over 35 years in the pharmaceutical industry. He's currently the president and CEO of AzurRx BioPharma, a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. He has been part of almost 12 dozen drug product launches and is specifically either led or has been a key member of several HIV product launches into different new classes of therapeutics at the time. James is a board member or board director for Bio, the leading biopharma industry organization promoting public policy and networking in the healthcare space, where he sits on both the health section and emerging companies section governing boards. Mr. Sapirstein received an MBA from Fort Dickinson University in 1997 and a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy from Rutgers University in 1984. I hope I pronounced your name and the names of the institutions correctly. All right, James, okay. I mean, it's truly a privilege to have you here on the show. I'm sure listeners will get a lot out of our conversation. So just to get started here, the first question that I usually ask my guest, James or Javier, as was your initial, your original name, when you were born and raised in Argentina. What's your link to Latin America personally and professionally? How is your journey to the region?
Interesting question. So, yes, I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. My real name is Javier Eduardo Sapirstein. I came here when I was young. And like most immigrants in the 60s, we maintained our Spanish at home. So I still speak it, although very simplistic Spanish as opposed to people who speak it every day. Then I went into the pharmaceutical industry, worked at Eli Lilly, and then went to Hospital Roche. I had a lot of different jobs at Hospital Roche, from sales marketing, sales training. And then at that time, someone approached me, and we had just started the very first specialty sales force with a fellow named Dan O'Day, actually. Dan O'Day is now the CEO of Gilead. Dan and I started a biotech specialty sales force together, where I felt a tap on my shoulder, literally a tap. And it was a guy who was the head of, or the president of Latin America for Roche. And he said to me, I'm looking for someone who's young, someone who can speak the language, someone who has sales and marketing experience. I cannot tell you what the job is, but I need you to move to Basel, Switzerland, which is where our home office is, and I would like you to take the job. So I consulted with a lot of people. It's hard. They tell you they want you to take a job. I was 31 years old at the time and negotiated a whole lot of things. So my base at the time, I had an apartment in Basel, but my base was in Mexico City, in Distrito Federal. So I was there for 6 months. And the job itself, what unbeknownst to me, was that Roche was acquiring a company called Syntex, which at that time was the largest pharmaceutical company in Mexico and one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in all of Latin America. And my job was to help train marketing managers and help choose through the integration process who was going to stay and who was going to go. So I spent a lot of time in country, in all the countries, every country but Bolivia and Guyana, where we had businesses. I got myself a visa in Brazil. And so for the next 2 years, I spent traveling all over Latin America, both integrating the companies, but also we became acquirers of other companies as well. When I came back from Switzerland to Hospital Roche in Nutley, New Jersey, that also was a new company, but I had the flavor for the international job, which I really, really liked. It was enjoyable, even though at Roche they offered me to become general manager of Costa Rica, pharma manager of Argentina. I wanted to come back to the United States. It's where I grew up. So I went over to Bristol Myers Squibb to work for a woman named Christine Poon. very same job I had at Roche. After being at Roche for 10 years, I went to Bristol Myers Squibb to do very much the same thing. We were in acquisition mode. We acquired at that time the largest pharmaceutical company in Peru, the second largest company in Colombia. So yeah, I have a whole network of great people all over Latin America.
Wow. You must be a wealth of knowledge about all things related to pharmaceuticals in Latin America. Fascinating story. Javier or James, can I call you Javier? Is that fine?
Javier is perfecto.
Okay, perfect. Javier, what major trends do you see in Latin America that are relevant to our discussion today? I mean, trends, I mean any epidemiological, political, economic, that are driving the business of pharmaceuticals or medical technologies in Latin America?
Wow, that's a loaded question. What hasn't changed? Let's just talk about first what has not changed. When I used to review performance with all the general managers in country, we always had a line at the bottom of the P&L, which it was different depending on the general manager you worked with. It was either miscellaneous, distribution costs, whatever it was. I always called it kickbacks. Money that had to be paid to the wholesalers, to certain distributors to make sure that your products are being used. Unfortunately, that has not changed. It doesn't drive market share. It's different in the United States. In the United States, obviously, it's a very larger piece of the P&L, but it drives market share. The more you invest in that line, it'll drive sales, it'll drive opportunity for your company. In Latin America, it's a given. If you don't participate, you're out. And if you participate at a large level, it doesn't mean what it's going to impact, what kind of impact you'd have on your product. So that needs to be changed. I think the models, the distribution models continue to change depending on the country. Some countries like Brazil, the wholesaler still controls a lot of power as opposed to the individual manufacturer. Places like Argentina and Colombia, you still have the local family-owned companies that still wield a lot of power, a lot of market share. And it's very hard. It's very hard to introduce new innovative products because price point is a problem. When you're a private company or family-owned company, you're balancing very mature product lines versus innovation. Who's going to pay for it? Yeah. They're not used to investing both on a marketing perspective and a clinical perspective on new and innovative products. Therefore, the price points are lower, the profit margins are smaller. There's been years where the private market has expanded, and that's been, that's when all the multinationals jump in. They're starting to see the private markets expand, and they take a big breath and say, okay, finally, the private market's going to expand into the middle class. But it's like an accordion in Latin America, depending on political power and the political winds. The markets expand and deflate at the same time. So sorry, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but the current trend right now with kind of a leftist or governments, both leftists and rights, both in Brazil and Argentina and Mexico, some of the larger markets, you're seeing a deflation of the markets until that improves.
Yeah, agree. All right, Javier, what do you think about the region as a place to conduct research for pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies, and also to sell products? I mean, is there an opportunity in Latin America to commercialize technologies and pharmaceuticals?
Juan, that's exactly where the opportunity is. Quite frankly, I think the doctors and the clinical staff in Latin America is as good as anything you'll find anywhere in the world, including the United States. I mean, certainly in the United States, you're going to have some outstanding medical centers like Mass General and Stanford that can't really be reproduced anywhere in the world. But when you're looking at the other primary and secondary institutions, phase 1 centers, phase 2 centers, I have to say the ones that I've seen in Brazil, Colombia, Argentina are second to none. They're very good. Their GMP, GLP facilities are excellent. On the Medtech side, their ability, for instance, in wound care, wound infections, I find that Latino doctors and their staff are far more adventurous in combination therapies and ways to treat people, because they have to be, quite frankly. They have to be much more adventurous. And I see you see some terrific outcomes, especially on the surgical front, wound care, burns, things of that sort. On the Medtech side, I think second to none. In my company, we're currently doing studies in Asia, Eastern Europe, United States. I'm new. I'm only been CEO of this company for 8 months, but I've challenged my staff. We're actually today closing on a round of 13.5 million, so we're going to be flush again. And I'm encouraging my staff to start going back into Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia. Colombia's got some of the best GI hospitals in the world, that we need to go back and look there.
Awesome, fantastic. Hopefully we can collaborate somehow in Colombia. All right, Javier, moving along here. In what specific countries, well, you kind of answered this, but what specific country you've had the most experience in Latin America in the past and now? What are you doing today in Latin America?
I wish I could tell you I'm doing a lot right now, but I'm not. My last company, Contravir, that I ran, we were running clinical studies in Argentina and Colombia. We were an infectious disease company back then. We were doing virology programs. So very friendly with the infectious disease people in Colombia. Their antimicrobial units, again, are second to none, very well educated. Many of the doctors, quite frankly, are educated in the States. So they have some great contacts. So we were conducting multidisciplinary cohorts, both phase 2 and in phase 3 as well, with very good results. Colombia, I think, is probably where I'd go, or Mexico at this point. Their regulatory departments are a little less political than we see right now in Argentina and Brazil. Obviously, Brazil and Argentina is where you have a very large amount of patients and excellent doctors who can do work very quickly. But going through the regulatory authorities and waiting a year sometimes just to be seen is very difficult.
Yeah, the issue is time and predictability. You need predictability. You need that if you submit document A, B, and C in 30 days, in 60 days, you're going to get approval. I mean, they're not going to come back to ask you for things that they didn't include in the list of requirements. So that's an issue that Colombia has become really good at that, and BIMA has become a lot more predictable, and the approval time has decreased a lot. I mean, the evaluation time, the approval time is another story, but the evaluation time, at least, they meet every so often. The medical device division meets every 30 days. The pharmaceutical division also meets every 30 days. So there's still two different committees, but you have time efficiencies and predictability. All right, so moving along here, Javier, what about regulatory approvals in Latin America? What experience have you had with pharmaceuticals or other technologies? With COFEPRIS in Mexico, Anvisa in Brazil, INVIMA, Colombia, etc. Yeah,
so my experience is old, to be honest. It dates, the last product launch I did that I was part of was in 2002 with Gilead. I used to be in the AIDS field, so it's old. It wasn't very good. There was a lot of theft of IP back then. I understand it's improved quite a bit. In Colombia, for sure, it's improved. Mexico, it's also improved, but Brazil is still a very, very bad culprit in terms of stealing IP, as is Argentina. They say they're getting better. We certainly have not seen a lot of evidence of that. So what you see commercially is a lot of delayed launches. And, again, the market's a private market. You go through distributors and you get approval, but then you distribute, to cash paying patients or people with good private access. But I wish I could give you a better answer, but my experience is old.
That's fine. But you're bringing up a very good point. The fact that a lot of these countries in Latin America are now members of the OECD makes things a lot easier. They're now following international policies and international best practices on how to do business. They have become more business friendly. In the a particular event that is happening in the region is the Pacific Alliance. You know, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And these 4 countries are now considered the most forward-looking economies in the region. They are all OECD countries. Brazil is still far in the process. So that makes a difference.
Yeah, and if I can give you an example, I'm chairman of a board of a company called Marazyme. Marazyme was started in Brazil. Basically, some very large investors that not Brazil, I'm sorry, Chile. In Chile, they farm krill. Krill is what the whales eat. Yeah. We use it for wound care. We also use it for cardiovascular use for arteriosclerotic patients to take some of the clots after they've been scoped. Yeah. We are doing a merger right now with another company here in the United States, and we have some Chilean investors, and we're looking at some other products that we have. Unfortunately, when we started the company in Chile, we did a lot of our clinical trials in Brazil, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm telling you, we can't even get our data. Not because of the doctors, but because of the hospitals, but because of the regulatory people.
Wow!
So
really?
Yeah, so it becomes a bit of a problem. So for me, when I travel, although I haven't been to Chile since January, but when I traveled to Chile to talk to my investors who are very, very frustrated, I explained to them, look, before I joined the company, you made this decision to do your work in Latin America, and we're paying the consequences right now. So the issue is we've got to put some formal project management, formal regulatory procedures to make sure that we're following the way America and Western Europe does clinical trials. Yeah. And that's not always necessarily the case.
Wow.
Unless you're doing a trial multinational.
Yeah. Multi-center, international. But you're also bringing up another point that is something that I remember from our initial introductory call where we discussed the podcast, that you are acquiring or you are involved with a Chilean company that has developed some technologies. I want to get a little more details on that because I am particularly interested in seeing homegrown companies in Latin America in life sciences, which is not very common. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, in what spots have you seen life science innovation happening in Latin America? Because most of the innovation in the region is imported innovation, right? And it gets adapted to the local market. But very few initiatives, or there's really no an ecosystem in the top economies in Latin America to really foster world-class medical innovation. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, that's a great question, and you're right. Most of the products that Latinos have seen for the last 50 years have been Me Too products or older products that are introduced into the country. You very rarely see NCE, as we call it, a new chemical entity that comes out. In our company, Marazyme, we have this product, made from krill. You wash it, you purify it, you grind it up into powder, and it helps eat up basically fat and other cholesterol items and other particles that you find in arteriosclerosis. So you can do cardiac bypass surgery, you can do angioplasty, and you sprinkle this powder in, and it helps clear away some of the old clots. We are in the middle of acquiring a company where we have a grafting product as well for people who have bypass surgery. It helps improve their healing with grafts. So we have complementary products. We have 2 other companies in Chile that I can't really tell you their names because they're private and I don't own them. Sure. We're trying very hard to acquire them. One of them, believe it or not, takes toxins from mussels in the Pacific Ocean farms, mussel farms, like clams, and they take these toxins, they purify them, and it works a lot like botulinum, like what you see in Botox, except it's not injectable. It's a cream, but you have to apply it more often. But it helps restore collagen. It's a very, very interesting company. I like these guys, and unfortunately, they can't get out of their own way. They don't really, because they don't have the right ecosystem. They keep spending money because they have money, but farming things out and trying to make a deal with Allergan, for instance, the United States. They don't have enough data yet. They really need probably to join a company like ours, and because we've developed. I've been in this business 37 years, developing drugs and just getting it done the right way, and then they can get it done. So there's some very interesting marine science going on in Chile with some of these scientists and some of the universities. In Brazil and Argentina, obviously, there's always been a great deal of virology study that's been going on just because of the tropical diseases. And right now with dengue is used to be in the jungles. It's all over the cities right now. So there's a lot of new research going on with dengue, and we're starting to see new chemical entities being formed for dengue. So big pharma in the United States has a lot of interest in partnering with some of the universities in Brazil and Argentina for dengue.
Wow. What about Mexico? Have you seen anything in Mexico, Colombia?
I can't say that I've seen it. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I don't know. I just haven't been privy to it.
Okay. Fascinating. All right. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that there's innovation happening in the region. It's not that common. All right. Moving along here, Javier, what do you think about the issue of corruption and bribery in Latin America in the life science business when you're commercializing medical products? Can you say something about that? Have you had an experience?
Sure. Well, yeah. So I was alluding to that earlier in the P&L line. Something you don't see in the United States or Europe when you're reviewing a business plan is you've got 10%, 12%, 20% that comes off the top line that goes right to corruption, and it's a lot. I mean, so when you're looking at a gross margin for a product that's 60%. And you need 60% in order to survive. So let me give you an example. Let me show you. I used to manage when I was at Bristol Myers and Roche. I managed an international organization, Latin America being included. So you'd want the general managers in country to launch a product, and say it was an antibiotic, and you're looking at Colombia, and Colombia has 5-6 antibiotics with Bristol Myers Squibb already, and the general manager says, well, my cost of goods is so low with these antibiotics, and you have this great new antibiotic that's come by, but my cost of goods is 40% as opposed to 2%, and then I've got to fit a 60% margin, so already I'm down to my 60% margin because of my cost of goods. Now I've got a 15% differential that I've got to pay in corruption costs. I'm down to 45%, and everything else is 70 or 80%. Why would I make my salespeople? Why would they want to get paid on something they're not going to make any money off of? So James, you're in charge. I get this, but I'd rather not launch this new drug because we're actually going to lose money. That's a problem. Wow. So that's where I think the governments don't really understand where corruption really affects the general public. That they think they're doing the right thing, because part of the corruption is they have to feed the cops, they have to feed this. Everyone has to get a taste, so to say. The problem becomes that the pharma companies, the medtech companies, cannot launch the products because big pharma is not going to say to Colombia, to Mexico, oh, that's okay, I'm going to lower your cost of goods because you got a special case. No. This is what the cost of goods is for everybody. And you've got to pay it, countryman. If you don't want to, that's up to you. You're going to be less profitable, and you're not going to have the newest products, and that's a decision we make. You mentioned earlier on, I'm at Bio. I'm a lobbyist as well with Bio, the organization. The International represents the pharmaceutical industry. And so is this issue with presidential politics in the United States, where Bernie Sanders will say, oh, we'll just go to Canada. Everyone says, we'll just go to Canada. What people don't understand, and the lay public should understand, is pharmaceutical companies control pricing all over the world. We also control distribution all over the world. It's not like the Canadian GM could say, okay, I'll supply the United States with all my product at a cheaper price. Because headquarters in New Jersey will say, well, we're not giving you any more product. So I don't think people understand that. You're basically just hurting the local economy. So price points, yes, we'll work with Colombia. I know I used to have these cost of good projects to try to lower cost of goods for some of the local, but for the most part, Latin American countries do not launch products on time because they just can't afford to because of corruption.
Interesting. You're also mentioning Bio, the organization that you're a board of directors, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that because my background is more in Medtech, and I'm very familiar with the work of AdvaMed, which I'm sure you know who they are. And they have a Latin American chapter, they have local country chapters and all that. Is there something similar happening with Bio in the pharmaceutical side?
For sure. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just had our meeting in June. We have our international meeting every June. Unfortunately, it was virtual this year. Normally, we have 25 to 30,000 attendees. We've got a very big floor. I know you're Colombian, but so there's always Bio Colombia is always very well represented. They have a very large booth. Wow. We have a big Latin American pavilion where the Colombians hang out with the Brazilians and the Argentines, and they're all there. There's most definitely a biotech unit in Colombia that represents all the pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies in Colombia. And we are, I want to say, over 95 countries around the world.
Wow, fascinating. Huh. Excellent. All right. So moving along here, Javier, we're close to the end of the show. I know you're a busy person. So a fun question here. I mean, is Latin America a nice place or a fun place to do business? I mean, what do you think about the people, the culture, the way people do business and behave in general?
Wow. So I'm going to say something very controversial, but if I wouldn't say it, then I wouldn't be Argentine. Okay. Because the old joke is, when you're from Argentina, the highest point to jump off of is an Argentine's ego. So, what I'll say, I learned that in Colombia. My Colombian friends told me that. So, to me, I've always categorized it this way. I spent probably 14, 15 years working in Latin America. And I say this from north to south, from Mexico down to, Tierra del Fuego. And in Mexico, they tend to overpromise and underdeliver. And in Chile and Argentina, they tend to underpromise and overdeliver. And all the other countries are kind of in between. And it's a shame. It's a shame because everyone tends to categorize Latin America as this one encompassed unit, and it's not. It's every country has a different way of doing business. I find, the corruption in Brazil, for instance, is second to none. Mexico is close. I don't see Colombia being very corrupt, to be honest with you. Venezuela, for sure. 20 years ago, Venezuela wasn't corrupt at all. Chile is probably the country that's most like the United States.
Yes, agreed.
Believe it or not, in the way they do business. Argentina, excellent medicine. They just can't get out of their own way, because they have such a socialistic way of looking at everything. So you have, Chile, Colombia, that's trying very hard to be a capitalist, organization. Mexico, who is a true capitalist society, but so corrupt and so run by criminals. It's crazy. And Brazil is just so big that it's again, very corrupt, and the corruption takes over. So is it a fun place? It's a very unique place to work. And it's challenging. The people, I love Latinos. I mean, it's just, the passion, the ability to learn. Everybody works really, really hard. They really want to be successful. What I tell, because I'm pretty American, so what I tell my cousins is the problem is that you're all so emotional, and you vote.
Yeah.
In America, the reason Trump keeps winning all the time is Americans vote with their wallets. In Argentina, Colombia, Puerto Rico, people vote with their emotions. And people really need to start thinking about the future and forget about the emotions. The passion's going to be there. People need to think about what's right and what's the right thing to do for the country. If you look at Argentina, the one I guess I'm most expert in, like Macri, who is the president, they didn't give this guy a chance. I mean, he had ideas within a year. The whole Congress went against him. Exactly. And then he fails at 2.5, 3 years. He's failing, and people wonder why. Yeah. And now we're back to a left-wing socialist.
Yes,
and people are going to be without jobs again. So, people and all the people who have dollars start leaving, and all the Brazilians now are coming to Florida. They're all over the place here. So, we have to get back to basics, and that's my feeling. I think it's a great place to work. Latin America makes me very sad because collectively, when you look at all the natural resources that they have, that they're selling, for instance, Bolivia is selling all its lithium to China. Yeah. The fact that no one's thinking about what to do with those natural resources and human resources and combining them and getting together, like Mercosur was a great idea. The Pacific program you talked about now, great idea. They just have to stay with it for a long period of time.
Agree.
Sorry, long answer.
No, beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. I love it. I totally love it because you're being very honest, and it's a great and accurate description of the dynamics of the region. And hopefully the Pacific Alliance will take off. I mean, it has taken off. I mean, it started 2010, and I see increasing activity. And eventually for pharmaceuticals, they will create a single regulatory environment where if you get approval in one country, it's going to be recognized in other countries. They have a lot of work to do with Chile, for example, for medical devices, because they're free, they're open, they don't really have a regulatory approval process, except for very basic class 1 low-risk products. But eventually, the Pacific Alliance will change how Latin America is perceived, because it's really the most serious initiative to unify the region, or at least starting with 4 countries. So that's great. And the OECD is doing a great job, I think.
Look, you're going to laugh at me, but I've got Colombian friends, and I've told them, if you think about all the effort in the drug wars that were made in the 90s, if the government just would have taken some of these people who've done a great job in the jungle in their laboratories and taught them how to make anesthesia. Think about it. How to refine anesthesia and supply the whole world with topical, cocaine-derived anesthesia, and then giving the money back to them. And think about that. Colombia could have led the world in production of anesthesia.
That's a great point.
just food for thought.
Yeah. All right.
People have to think. How do you work together?
Yes. I like it. All right. Javier, before we sign off for today, do you have any final thoughts, morsels of wisdom, or other musings for our listeners? In other words, what would you say to the CEO of a biotech or early stage biotech or medtech company that is just starting to look at places to do research or to sell their products after they're commercial in the US or Europe? So what would be your word of advice to the CEO of one of these companies?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because I've seen a lot of mistakes made by local CEOs. Yeah. They tend to want to partner with big companies. Don't ever think, just because it's America, it's great, and you need to go to big companies and partner. Within bio, there's some very good organizations that you can find that you can help you. There's some good people that can help you. I would tell them, be careful on trusting Americans. because they're not always looking out for your own good. And that's big companies. So I would tell them be very, very careful. And then the other thing is be careful to listen just to your local people too, who tell you, no, we've got this right. Sometimes pride gets in the way of really examining. The problem with smaller companies in Latin America is they don't realize the amount of work that has to be done because they don't have the experience. So they need to really import people and bring people in from the United States that can help them. I think when you look at China, that's what they've done really, really well. They've put their people in this university systems in the United States, and then they take them out with great experience. And I think that's really what Latin America, from a government perspective, if they're serious about building up a very profitable business venture for their countries, that's what they should do. There's some great universities here that can exchange students and then bring them back to your country. I know when I was chairman of BioNJ, I've created an entrepreneurship program with fellows, and we've done just that. We've got 7 fellows because it's still fairly new. But that's what I would say. If you've got money to invest in a company, send some people out, learn from the United States, Europe, bring them back, and then start your company.
Okay, but that's from the perspective of local innovation, fostering local innovation. Okay, yes, biotech or medtech companies that are homegrown in the region. But so what about foreign companies that are looking at Latin America, medtech or biotech?
Yeah, that's get yourself a good interpreter.
Yeah. I guess that's the best advice.
I'll tell you, when I've been in that situation, just a quick, look, my English is fairly perfect. I don't have an accent. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where everyone thinks I'm the gringo, right? The gringo, I don't understand the word of Spanish, and I'm listening to everything they say, and they're just not translating at all correctly, if you know what I mean. And then I'll listen to it for about half an hour, and I'll tell them in Spanish, okay, this is what we're going to do, because you didn't tell my boss everything you were supposed to say. But in any case, I think there's some great opportunities. I think IP is important. When you're a big company, make sure that you've got and understand all the IP laws in country. Because the problem with Latin America is those laws change too often. In the U.S., the IP laws change maybe every 10 years. In Brazil, they change every 8 months, it seems like. So you have to be ready for that. So that's the big question mark.
All right, excellent. All right, Javier, thank you so much for being in the show. I mean, I really enjoy our conversation. I'm sure listeners did as well. So I look forward to exploring collaboration opportunities in Latin America with your company and in general with your other ventures.
Okay, un placer. Thank you.
Gracias.
Ciao. Okay, bye-bye. Ciao.